Today's lesson is lesson 1.8 on the essential question is how do scientists categorize and name living things? And this is focusing a lot on identifying organisms and kind of how do we put them where they belong. So we're going to focus on dichotomous keys, which are also known as classification keys, and creating something called cladograms and reading cladograms that show evolutionary relationships based on derived characteristics and DNA evidence. So this last part's really going to support more rather than just an appearance of how organisms appear and putting those organisms together. It's going to base them more on DNA evidence. So the first thing we're going to look at is the dichotomous key. Di means two. We're going to do this fun one here. We're going to take a look at this image and pretend that we can't read what it says and we don't know what it is. And we're going to start with step one, and there's always two parts. So it's packaged or unpackaged. And in this case, it's packaged, so it tells us to go to step two. Boxed or wrapper, well, they have a wrapper, so let's go to step 4. So we're skipping over step 3. Plastic wrapper, wax paper wrapper. These are wax paper wrappers, so let's skip over that and go to step 7. Go to step 6. On a stick or not on a stick. Looking at the appearance of it, which is really important. You're looking at this organism. You'd see it's not on a stick. So right here would be the name of what we are trying to identify, Tootsie Roll. So you can try that on your own with the other two images. If we were going to apply this in nature, we often will see different images of, in this case, this is the flower right here. And we want to know, according to this dichotomous key, can we identify what this flower is? And so you see there's lots of different flower choices, but we're going to use the dichotomous key. Does it have 5 petals or 7 petals? So these are the petals. It's important to look at the picture. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So it's 7 petals. That means its common name is the star flower, but its scientific name is Trentus borealis. It's important to talk about looking at images, and sometimes students count these as the petals. Really wouldn't matter in this case because there's 7, but it's to look carefully at the diagrams that are provided to you. So in class, students are assigned to come up with the names of these individual smiley faces by using this dichotomous key. So check that out, and you can check with me for your answers. So we're going to talk a little bit about how we've made advances, and now we can look at organisms at the molecular level, so we can compare DNA and talk more about evolutionary relationships than just appearance. And this evolutionary classification is called phylogeny. It's really where we're looking at relationships among organisms. So you can see that this is indicating a relationship. These are closely related to because they're together on these branches, but that's not. And then you can see kind of a divergence in different organisms. So a human, if you find up here, has a common ancestor of a cartilaginous fish. And so that is one different way of looking at relationships among organisms. And it looks like trees or branches. And if you decide to take AP biology, we do spend some time figuring out and placing organisms using a program called BLAST. If you want to look it up, it's really a neat program. We're going to just talk a little bit about how these scientists show these patterns. Usually there's a dash line that shows the present and it has a past. So A, B, and C are these common ancestors, and then you can see the branching that happens as evolution occurs. So if we were going to use something called cladistic analysis to talk about how organisms are related or what part of the lineage that share certain characteristics, we could make something called a cladogram. So it sounds like Play-Doh, cladogram, and it's based on derived characters. So in this case, we're going to show evolutionary relationships, and this is just an example. This is not necessarily accurate. But you can see these are the derived characters: dorsal nerve cord, bony skeleton, amniotic egg, mammary glands, and hooved feet. So these organisms are going to have something in common. And actually, there's something missing right here: radial cleavage. So they're symmetrical. So all of these things have radial cleavage. So they all share that relationship of a derived character. However, the dorsal nerve cord, the sea star, no longer has that. So I like to think of it like a train stop. They're off the train when it gets to this stop. The rest of them are on because they have that in common. So I encourage you to check out the one assignment we did. It was a little mini lab, was to try to figure out what the derived characters are, what distinguishes these different organisms. While before they all have wings, but there's different characteristics that separate them. And I want you to kind of think about, must an organism, a species, be able to reproduce in order for the species to survive? Explain why or why not. Defend your point of view there. So that is the wrap for Unit 1.